Hey, you crazy kids, and welcome to another episode of Voices, the podcast that does not have a consistent schedule. Still working on that part. I am Daniel, a 20-some-year-old with back problems, who today is going to relay to you some stories of his childhood. I'll stop talking in the third person, but to get into the specifics, we all have those moments when we do something stupid, and sometimes it's not until years later that we realize how stupid those moments actually were, and how stupid we really were. And I'm not trying to make any generalizations. Maybe you don't think you were stupid when you were younger or as a kid, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine to be wrong and completely inaccurate. But I consider myself to have been a stupid kid, mostly because I lacked good judgment. It's not that I wasn't smart, I didn't have a lot of common sense. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So in this episode, I'd like to share some stories about stupid moments of me just being a dumb kid. You know, these are I think most of these stories are preteen years, so I'm sure you'll get a kick out of them. Maybe you'll be able to relate to them. If not, then I will just be talking to myself this entire time, which would be awkward. So hopefully that's not the case. But let's get into it. My first story involves a rock, well, more of a small stone, and a car window. And I'm sure you can imagine where this is going to go, but to set everything up for you, I was at my cousin's house, and this was some sort of family reunion that was going on, and all the adults, all the aunts and uncles, and my parents were on the back porch, and all of the kids were in the driveway, and the driveway was completely made of gravel. So some of the older cousins had decided to, pick up some of the smaller pieces of gravel and just throw them and see sort of how many they could get to stay on the tops of the cars, on the roofs of the cars. And they weren't like throwing them too hard or anything. They weren't chucking them. They were just sort of lobbing them lightly to the top of the cars. And of course, all the other little cousins were heavily influenced by the older cousins. So we immediately followed suit, and I was probably 4 or 5 at the time. So I didn't really have a lot of common sense at that age, and I'm sure a lot of kids along with me did not. So I thought it would be fun to join in, and I was doing the same thing as everybody else for a while. And at one point, I grabbed a sizable rock, and I decided to aim just a little lower than I should have. I don't know if I was doing that purposely or if I wasn't really thinking. I definitely wasn't thinking, but anyways, I was aiming for my parents' car, and I actually managed to shatter one of the windows in my parents' car. I think it was the left passenger side window. And my parents were not thrilled, as you can imagine, and our family had to drive back to our house, which is a little over an hour away, with a garbage bag taped over the window. Thankfully, as far as I can remember, there was no severe punishment unless I completely, blocked that out of my head, which could be the case. I don't think you can really punish a kid as easily for doing something so stupid, especially when he doesn't know any better, and especially when any of my cousins could have done the same exact thing. I just happened to be the one who had the worst judgment and just was not thinking at all. So, of course, that's just on me. That's on me. That was on my stupid 4/5-year-old self. Story number 2 is a little interesting. I think it's one of my more embarrassing moments, and I'm here sharing it with all of you. But anyways, when I was younger and when my sisters were younger, they had this bead set. They liked to make bead jewelry, bracelets, necklaces, that kind of stuff. And they just had this box of beads that they kept in their room. And I was curious, and I decided to play with them. And out of curiosity, I don't know what drove me to do this, but I decided to stick one up my nose just to see if it would fit, I'm assuming. And I immediately realized that I could not get the bead out of my nose. And I wasn't smart enough to, plug the other nostril and just blow out of my nose. I was a snot-nosed kid, so the bead was slippery to even grab with my fingers. I tried sticking my fingers up my nostril, and that really ultimately just pushed the bead further. So I ran screaming to my mom, and I was very focused on my breathing because I was really afraid that I was going to push it even further and it was never going to come out of my nose. But of course, the one thing that my mom tended to do when we were really just not using our heads was roll her eyes. So she rolled her eyes, said, "For heaven's sakes," and she grabbed a pair of tweezers and just pulled it right out of my nose, and it took her like 5 seconds. So that was a moment where I thought I was going to die or something, and I was reassured by my mom. My mom came to the rescue, as she and my dad have many times as a kid when I've done something stupid, and when any of us have done anything stupid. So maybe you have a parent out there who has saved your butt from either from yourself or from actual danger. And if you have, go ahead and leave a comment and tell me some of your stories also during this. If you have any stories that are relatable, times where you think, man, I kind of had a dumb moment as a kid, let me know. I'd love to hear some of those stories. But I think these first two stories, there's a similar mentality. I sort of equate both of these to the idea of when you're playing Frisbee too close to your house, and you kind of know what's going to happen. You kind of have a feeling that the Frisbee is eventually going to get stuck on the roof. You're just kind of waiting for one person to throw it too high, and it just soars all the way up there and basically never comes down. You're sort of testing the fates. You're tempting the fates. It's going to get stuck, and you're just biding your time until it happens. And that's kind of what I was doing with the rock. I was thinking, eventually something's going to happen where it's going to hit a window. And I just ended up being the person who caused that rock to make contact and break that window. And same with the bead. My curiosity got the better of me. I thought, well, what would happen if I stick this up my nose? I'm never going to know until I find out. So it's really a matter of tempting the fates and just having that morbid curiosity. Another story that I think might be unique to my own childhood, and maybe not, but I think it was pretty unique. I had something called a Beanie Baby catapult. This was something my brother and I shared, and we were very proud of it at the time. I think we were probably in our preteens, probably 10 years old, around there. And we took one of our dad's exercise resistant bands. These are the bands that have the handles on the end. They're basically just like a giant, not a rubber band, but like an elastic band that you stretch out. And what we did was we took the two ends of it and tied both ends to the ends of our bedposts in our rooms, because we had twin beds, and they were parallel with each other. And the space in between them was adjacent to the door leading into the bedroom. So what we would do is we had this tub full of Beanie Babies. If you don't know what they are stuffed animals, but they're not stuffed with stuff or cotton. They're stuffed with beads. And if you get whacked with one, it can hurt quite a bit. But what we did was we tied the resistance bands to the bed, and we just took the Beanie Babies, pulled them back on the resistance band, and shot them through the doorway. And sometimes we would have our sister's door open when they weren't around, and we would shoot them through their room. And that was all we did. There was no point system or anything. We just flung Beanie Babies across the hall into our sister's room, and that was how we entertained ourselves some days. At one point, we did end up breaking something. There was a light fixture and a glass covering over the light fixture in the hallway, like right in the middle, right in the center of the hallway, in the path leading from our doorway to our sister's doorway. And we I don't know how we didn't do it so much sooner. This was weeks after we had been using the catapult, and finally one day we shot a Beanie Baby too high. It hit that light fixture and it shattered. And I really don't remember us getting in trouble that much for this, because we kept doing the catapult after that, and at that point we just put a few pillows, I think, underneath it on the floor of the hallway, just to avoid anything falling and shattering again, even though there was no light fixture. So we're more likely to just break a light bulb or, cause some damage to the actual fixture. So I'm pretty sure I didn't block any severe punishments out of my head from that, because we continued to do it afterwards. And I don't know if we ever hit somebody with the Beanie Babies, but it definitely was not, it didn't stop us. It didn't stop us for a while, and until we did end up selling our Beanie Babies, actually. Not our decision, definitely our parents' decision, but probably for the best, I'd say. During these podcasts, I think I'd like to introduce some different segments just to, sort of spice things up, if you can call it spicing up. Just to have a segment where people can interact and share their opinions and thoughts and things. And it's not necessarily going to have anything to do with the overall topic of the episode. But I wanted to call this particular segment, This Doesn't Make Sense to Me. And in this segment of This Doesn't Make Sense to Me, I wanted to talk about the song Escape, also known as the Pina Colada song, sung by Rupert Holmes. We have all heard the song, if you like pina coladas, getting caught in the rain, if you're not into yoga, if you have half a brain. The overall story of this is that this guy is basically planning to cheat on his wife, his partner, whoever it is, with somebody that had an ad in the paper who sounded really adventurous. So he was going to leave his lover and run off with this other person. And at the end of it, it turns out to be his lover who wrote the ad in the paper. So if you think about it, she was also trying to get away from him. They were both planning on leaving each other. And the end of the song is just them sort of reconciling and getting back together and realizing, oh, we didn't know that we both liked these things about each other, so everything's cool. And that's what doesn't make sense to me. I feel as though they would need some serious couples counseling just to, sort of sort those things out. What drove them to the point where they would be okay with leaving each other instead of getting to know each other and realizing that they had those similarities all along? It's not something that you could just laugh off and live happily ever after. You need to do some serious therapy, some serious counseling, something, because that's not going to, it doesn't seem like that's something that's going to last, especially if, you got bored with them once. What's the likelihood that you're going to get bored with them again and want to leave them, put another ad in the paper? So is it just going to be a vicious cycle? Rupert Holmes, you have some explaining to do. Is this going to happen again? I need to know, because this does not make any sense. That has been today's segment of This Doesn't Make Any Sense to Me. Moving on to the next story of poor judgment. Well, maybe this was just stupidity. I really don't know. I'm still debating it to this day, and maybe it's because of this event that I am debating it, but I will set the scene for you. I was playing tag outside. It was dark. It was during the winter. There was much snow on the ground. This was at our old house in Ohio, and I was probably maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I can't remember if I was playing tag with all of my siblings or if it was just me and my brother, maybe my neighbors. But I remember that I was not the person who was it, but I was running away from the person who was it. And I'm almost positive they were in close proximity to me. So I was running. I was on the side of our house. I was running toward the tree on the side of our house, and I turned around to try to see where my brother was or whoever was it, And I think the plan was to swerve away from the tree at the last minute to sort of give them the slip. And somehow I had timed everything improperly, because as soon as I turned around, my head went straight into the tree. I went head first into the tree. I know that I blacked out for about a second, and when I opened my eyes, I was conscious. I knew exactly what had happened, and I was in a lot of pain, and I crawled through the snow. I wasn't too far from the house. I was only a few feet from our doorstep, but I crawled into the house screaming, and I could barely, I tried making it up the small little stairway that we had that led into our kitchen. But I was not feeling great, and my mom rushed me to the ER, and that entire time I kept feeling like I was going to throw up. I thought something was going to happen to me. I thought I had broken something. I was just freaking out, and it turned out I got a CAT scan. There was no concussion. There was no sign of any internal damage, just some emotional damage probably. And maybe that's why I'm such a weird kid today, because I decided to run into a tree, unless I was always meant to be a weird kid even before then. Who's to say, really? Except maybe my parents. I'll have to ask them about that. And I will get back to you on that, whether that was happening before the tree incident or not, or it just started afterwards. But that was my first time ever in the emergency room, and my first time ever getting a CAT scan, and actually my first and only time running into a tree. Let's hope that it stays that way. I'm not expecting any more George of the Jungle moments in my near future, and hopefully for the rest of my life, however long that may be. And we come down to our final story of me being a stupid kid. I understand that you might be upset, you want to hear more. Unfortunately, because of that tree incident, I probably have some form of memory loss, because I don't remember. I'm sure there are plenty of instances, events where I was still a pretty dumb kid. Some that probably trump the current stories, the last few stories that I've told you. But I promise that I will do my best. If I do happen to remember some more, I've actually reached out to my family to ask them if they remember anything. But so far, I've been the only one who's remembered these things. So we'll see if they can come up with anything. If they do, maybe I'll do another episode. But for now, we'll just stick with these stories that I have, and hopefully they've been entertaining for you. This is the SeaMonkey Incident, and it starts out with my mom. I believe this was my first time having anything remotely close to a pet. My mom had ordered me these they were either sea monkeys or triops. I don't really know which one it was. I'm pretty sure they were sea monkeys because they were really tiny. But she bought me sea monkey eggs and a mini aquarium. And I remember waiting weeks for this to come in the mail. This was in the days before Amazon, I believe, or at least in the early days of Amazon, where things didn't take, you didn't have Prime. This wasn't something that could come within a day or two. This was something that you had to wait 6 to 8 weeks to get shipped to your house. It was agony. It was agony having to wait that long. But now for people, waiting 2 days is agony. So it's really changed. Perspective has really changed in the past 15, 20 years, unfortunately. But anyways, it came in the mail. I don't remember if this was a birthday gift or a Christmas gift or something, but I was super excited. And my mom and I put them in the water the day I got them. This was a really small aquarium. It was probably the size of an average size Tupperware container. And I put them in the night before. They hatched overnight. Woke up the next morning, and I was super excited to see them swimming around. They were so tiny that it was pretty difficult to see them, but you could. They were a little translucent, but I could see them swimming around a little bit because there were so many of them. And I started naming them all. I started getting attached to them, even though it was impossible to keep track. I don't even know what I was thinking at that point. But again, as we have established, I was not. I was lacking in the common sense department at that time. I'm pretty sure this was also age 4 or 5. But anyways, the container sat on the dining room table for the day, and I was just watching them. That was all I was doing the entire day. I was just watching them, and every so often I was also playing with some stuffed animals while watching the sea monkeys. And of course, I had my stuffed animals on the table with me, and I still have my parents still have the bear. I actually found it the other day when I was visiting with them. They had it in a sealed bag with some other stuffed animals, but I remember the exact bear and I'll post on Instagram the actual bear that was the reason for this incident. Anyways, I was playing with the stuffed animals on the table, and I had this particular bear dancing on top of the container. And I think this also goes back to another moment of the Frisbee comparison. What will happen if I, play a little too aggressively with this bear on top of this mini aquarium? Back then, I'd like to think that part of me always knew how bad of an idea things like that were, but that part was frequently repressed in the recesses of my mind. And ultimately, my stupidity and my poor judgment is what triumphed. So, anyways, the bear and the aggressive playtime caused the lid to fall over. The lid was not secure enough, and everything spilled out. All of the sea monkeys had been spilled out of the container, and we were not able to salvage any of them, unfortunately. They fell onto the dining room table. They were so tiny and translucent that you couldn't see where any of them were, so there was no way to know, or there was no way to save them. There was no way to know where any of them were. So they spilled on the dining room table, they spilled on the chair, they spilled on the floor. I wouldn't be surprised if to this day there are still dead sea monkeys. Oh gosh, there might be dead sea monkeys on the dining room floor of the old house we used to live in. And it's somebody else's problem that they'll never know about. That's kind of a morbid way of thinking about it. And I'm sorry if I disturb some of you with that, but I was devastated at that time. I was devastated. I didn't think so much about the fact that I killed the sea monkeys. I was more devastated about the fact that I just got this pet yesterday, and now I don't have this pet anymore. And that is the SeaMonkey incident. I like to think that I grew a lot from that experience, in the sense that I know that as a kid at least I could not take care of pets, and I don't necessarily know how well I'd fare to this day. I also had goldfish. They didn't last very long, but I don't think that was any fault of mine. I think that was just the goldfish. Maybe the sea monkeys would have lasted longer than them. But again, we will never know. We'll never know that for sure. I hope that I could entertain you, or at least be able to relate to you with all of these stories of me not being a smart kid in the common sense. It was quite the journey. It was quite the journey for me. I did a lot of growing up. I definitely have my wits about me, more so now as a 20-some-year-old. And that's all a part of growing up. I mean, as soon as I turn 26 and my brain stuff's developing, it's going to be all downhill from there. But for now, I like to think that I have much better judgment. And who knows, maybe someday I will be willing to take care of a pet. I will be willing and able to take care of a pet. Maybe I'll steer clear from the aquatic pets, the fish and the sea monkeys, and maybe stick to something that's maybe a little easier to take care of. Maybe like a pet rock. I've heard from people that pet rocks are very easy to take care of. So who knows? I think maybe getting a dog or a cat is going a little too far for me, especially. We'll see. Updates to follow, for sure. I want to thank you for having listened to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, feel free to share any stories that you have in the comments or on my Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook page. Incidents of you being a not so bright kid that you find entertaining or you find embarrassing that you're okay sharing. I'd love to hear them. I will retweet you if you share them to me on Twitter. I will probably like them if you share them to me on Instagram. Let me know. I'd love to hear from all of you. And if you have any ideas for topics, other topics that you find relatable that you would want me to discuss, I'd love to hear them. I'm always looking for suggestions, especially with this new podcast format. I'm working on several different ideas, and I just want to be able to provide you some sort of format that you would be open to listening to, that you will be entertained by, or at least something that is going to catch your ear. You don't have to laugh at every single episode, but I'd like something that will be able to relate to all of you on a much deeper level. Maybe today wasn't so deep because I was just talking about me being dumb, but you know what I mean. I think you know what I mean, because I really want to be able to connect with all of you a lot more. So share your thoughts in the comments, and you'll hear from me soon. Bye.